The note had 4 sentences. The marriage had 9 years. Johnson Party stood on his own front porch at 5:30 in the morning, key that no longer worked in his hand, reading 4 sentences that were supposed to end him. His wife Marty had changed the locks, hired an attorney, purchased a Bellevue condo with their joint savings, and listed another man's name as her emergency contact, all before Johnson's flight from Phoenix had even landed. Most men would have called, screamed, driven back to that house and demanded answers. Johnson did none of those things. He checked into room 114 of a budget motel, opened his laptop, and started reading bank statements. What he found over the next 72 hours wasn't just evidence of an affair, it was the detailed financial blueprint of a woman who had been quietly dismantling their life for months. And Johnson Party, the man who builds things designed to last, had just decided to build something she never saw coming. Viewers, have you ever watched someone underestimate a quiet person? You already know how that ends. Before we continue, please subscribe, like and share. My name is Johnson Party. I'm 41 years old, a structural engineer based in Seattle, Washington, and for 15 years I have built things designed to last: bridges, retaining walls, foundations that hold entire buildings above the earth without complaint. People in my line of work learn one thing above everything else: every structure has a breaking point. You just have to know where to look. I grew up in Tacoma, the quieter son of a loud household, trained early to observe rather than react. My father settled every disagreement by volume. I settled mine by patience. My colleagues call it methodical. My wife, my ex-wife, once called it her favorite thing about me. Her name is Marty Johnson. We met at a wedding in Portland 11 years ago. She was radiant, certain, magnetic. I was drawn to her the way a suspension bridge is drawn taut, held up by the very tension between opposing forces. We married 2 years later in Ashford, Washington. 9 years together. No children. Marty always said the timing never felt right. I always accepted that. I accepted most things. I should have asked more questions. I know that now. I had been in Phoenix for 10 days, a job site review on a commercial foundation project that kept running over schedule. 10 days of bad hotel coffee, aching shoulders, and nightly phone calls with Marty that felt normal. She asked about the weather. I asked about her week. She laughed at my jokes. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing felt like a goodbye. I landed at Seattle-Tacoma International just before midnight, collected my carry-on, and drove home through rain-slicked streets with the quiet anticipation of a man returning to something safe. I pulled into our Wedgwood driveway at 5:30 in the morning. The house was dark. I grabbed my bag, walked to the front door, and slid my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. I stood in the gray Seattle morning blinking at my own front door like a stranger. Then I saw it, a white envelope taped perfectly centered beneath the porch light, my name written across the front in Marty's neat, precise handwriting. 4 sentences inside. The marriage was over. She needed me gone. My belongings would be available for pickup. Her attorney would be in touch. 4 sentences. 9 years. I stood there until the porch light clicked off automatically, and the darkness felt deliberate. I did not call her. I want you to understand that clearly. I stood on that porch for 4 full minutes, read the note twice more, folded it along its original crease, placed it back in the envelope, and walked to my car. I drove to a budget motel near Lake City and checked into room 114. It smelled like carpet cleaner and other people's regrets. I sat on the edge of the bed and I did not cry. I thought. That distinction matters. My father would have driven back to that house and hammered the door until someone answered. I'd watched that approach destroy him repeatedly throughout my childhood in Tacoma, all noise, no result, every emotion weaponized against himself. I had promised myself at 17 that I would never be that man. So instead I opened my laptop, pulled up our joint bank statements, and began reading. I had always handled the income. Marty had always handled the spending. I had trusted that arrangement completely, which I now understood had been a catastrophic miscalculation on my part. What I found in those statements didn't break me. It woke me up. And a man fully awake, I've learned, is a genuinely dangerous thing. The numbers told a story Marty had never intended me to read. For cash withdrawals totaling $22,000 across 8 weeks. 3 wire transfers to an account I didn't recognize. A recurring charge of $1,850 monthly to a Bellevue property management company I had never heard of. I remember sitting in that motel room with the laptop screen glowing against my face, feeling something cold and architectural settle in my chest, not heartbreak exactly, but the specific sensation of watching a load-bearing wall reveal a hidden crack. I called my attorney, Carol, in Bellevue the next morning. She specialized in family law and had a reputation for being methodical and merciless in equal measure, qualities I deeply respected. She told me 3 things: don't move out voluntarily, don't agree to anything in writing, and don't tip my hand. Then I drove to a FedEx office and printed everything. I found the King County property records next. Marty had purchased a 1-bedroom condo in Bellevue 4 months ago, in her name only, using a down payment traceable directly to our joint account. She had been planning this while I was flying between job sites, trusting her with everything we had built together. Everything. The condo's HOA emergency contact form had been scanned into the county's digital archive, a bureaucratic accident that Marty could not have anticipated. The secondary contact name listed beneath hers read, Raymond Okafor. I didn't recognize it. So I searched it. Raymond Okafor, licensed real estate agent, Bellevue-based brokerage, 34 years old. 7 years younger than Marty. His agency profile photo showed a man who smiled easily, the kind of smile that fills a room without trying. He was her colleague. I sat in that FedEx office parking lot in the rain and counted backward. 18 months ago, Marty had mentioned a talented new agent joining her brokerage. She'd described him as ambitious. She'd offered to mentor him. I had nodded and asked what was for dinner. I had been so certain our marriage was solid that I had stopped inspecting the foundation. I thought about a conversation we'd had 3 years ago, late at night on our back porch, when Marty told me she never wanted to be caught off guard financially. I had found it admirable then. I understood it differently now. I hired a private investigator named Sandra out of Tacoma the following morning. I told her, document everything. Sandra called me 9 days later. Her voice was flat, professional, unhurried, the voice of a woman who had delivered difficult news enough times that she had stopped cushioning it. She said, "Mr. Party, I have what you need. You should sit before I send it." 12 photographs. A 17-page observation log. Raymond's car at the Bellevue condo on 11 separate nights, each image time-stamped. A Capitol Hill restaurant receipt paid on Marty's business card. And a Portland weekend, 3 months prior, when Marty had told me she was attending a real estate conference. She had attended one afternoon of it. The rest of the weekend was documented in Sandra's log with the quiet thoroughness of someone who understood that details win cases. I remember my brother's divorce 10 years ago, watching him walk into a settlement meeting unprepared, emotional, emptied. I had sat beside him through every hearing, catalogued every mistake, filed every lesson somewhere deep and permanent. Marty had never known that story in detail. She had never asked. I opened the files Sandra sent and I felt something my father never managed in his loudest moments: complete, absolute stillness. Carol filed a restraining order on further financial transfers the next morning. Quietly. Surgically. Marty wouldn't know until it landed. Marty's attorney proposed mediation 2 weeks after the note. Philip Crew, known for pressuring opposing counsel into fast settlements, framed it as informal, low stakes, neighborly. Carol told me it was a trap designed to move quickly before I'd fully organized my position. I told Carol to accept immediately. I wanted that room. I arrived first, wearing the charcoal suit I'd worn to our wedding rehearsal dinner. When Marty walked in and saw me, not a devastated, disoriented husband but a man with a legal pad, a calm expression, and 2 banker's boxes of documentation, her composure flickered. Just once. She recovered fast. She always did. She offered me a small, practiced smile and said I was handling this maturely. I said nothing. Carol placed 3 items on the table: the Bellevue condo deed, the highlighted bank statements, and a sealed envelope she described only as supplemental documentation pertaining to marital conduct. Philip Crewe glanced at the envelope. Then at Marty. Marty's fingers laced together on the table and pressed down, the involuntary gesture of a person steadying something internal. Philip requested a recess. Marty stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked toward the hallway. At the corner, she looked back at me once. Not with anger. With something that looked uncomfortably close to respect. 3 days after mediation, Raymond called me. He'd found my number through the public listing still tied to the Wedgwood house. He asked to meet, man to man, he said, just to talk. I recognized the architecture of that request immediately. Marty had sent him. We met at a diner in Renton on a Thursday morning. He was younger in person, handsome in a soft way, nervous in a harder way. He ordered coffee and never touched it. His apology came first, rehearsed, smooth, the kind designed to close a conversation before it opens. Then the pivot: Marty hadn't meant for things to happen this way. She'd been unhappy for years. She hoped we could handle the divorce without making things ugly. I listened to every word. Then I asked him one question. Did she tell you about the condo? He blinked. What condo? I watched his expression rearrange itself in real time as I explained, calmly, without emotion, that the Bellevue property had been purchased with joint marital funds, that his name appeared on HOA paperwork, and that discovery in our litigation would now include every financial transaction traceable to that address. Raymond pulled out his phone and called Marty right there at the table. She didn't answer. He tried twice more. Silence. The man who'd helped dismantle my marriage sat across from me looking like someone who just realized he was never the architect, only the materials. Marty's team offered settlement 3 separate times before we reached the courtroom. 3 times, the figures undervalued what Washington community property law plainly entitled me to. 3 times I said no. I wanted a judge. Not for spectacle, for permanence. For a record that could not be quietly revised later. The hearing ran 4 hours inside a King County courtroom under fluorescent lights that flattered nobody. Carol presented the complete financial forensics: the condo, the withdrawals, the wire transfers routed through a property holding structure Marty had incorporated 4 months before she taped that note to our door. The judge, a woman in her early 60s, reading glasses on a chain, asked Marty directly why a joint account had funded a solely titled property. Philip Crewe attempted to interject. She looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student reaching for an answer they haven't earned. He stopped. The final order: the Bellevue condo to be sold with proceeds split equally. The $34,000 in dissipated marital assets credited against Marty's share. The Wedgwood house listed within 60 days. It wasn't triumph. It was accounting. But in that accounting, every hour I had spent in room 114 paying attention instead of panicking had compounded into something real. As we filed out, Marty paused beside me in the hallway, said nothing, and stepped into the elevator without looking back. I let her go. That was 14 months ago. The Wedgwood house sold in 11 days. My half of the proceeds became a down payment on a place in Fremont, a neighborhood Marty always called too hip. I love it. There's a bookstore around the corner where nobody knows my name, and I've spent more Saturday mornings there than I can count. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Marty and Raymond didn't last, that once the legal costs hit and the condo drama surfaced, the romance lost its structural integrity. I wasn't surprised. I don't hate Marty. Hatred requires sustained energy, and I'm an engineer. I don't assign load-bearing capacity to condemned structures. What I feel, mostly, is the clean and unfamiliar quiet of a life that is finally honest. No notes on doors. No money disappearing. No reading someone's face for information they've chosen to withhold. Just my work, my Fremont apartment, and a gray tabby I adopted 6 months ago and named Blueprint. People ask what I'd do differently. I tell them, nothing. Not because the loss wasn't real, it was. But because the way I handled it was the truest version of who I am. I stayed silent. I waited. I was thorough. I'll tell you one more thing, though, and this part keeps me up sometimes. That third wire transfer, the one that didn't go to the shell company? The name attached to it wasn't Marty's. It wasn't Raymond's either. It belonged to someone I had trusted even longer than I had trusted her. That story isn't finished yet. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.